I always thought Leo was tough, not in the loud, cocky way teenage boys sometimes are, but in the quiet way that says, I've been through some things. He kept his emotions close, like he was afraid if he let them out too fast, they might explode. That made what happened that day even harder to watch. It was a Tuesday afternoon, just before the end of summer. Leo was in the middle of his sculpture workshop at the Harlow Institute, the kind of place that called itself prestigious in the brochures and charged like it. He'd gotten in on a merit scholarship, which meant he was already walking into the studio with a target on his back. His instructor, Camilla Jensen, made sure of that. I was in the parent lounge when I got the text from another dad I barely knew. You might want to check Studio B. Something happened with your kid. I don't remember walking down the hall. I just remember the heat in my chest and the way everything sounded muffled until I opened the door. Leo was on the floor, face pale, breathing fast, his shirt soaked in sweat and speckled with dust and tiny chips of marble. His hands were trembling, holding onto the edge of a stone plinth like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Students backed away as instructors rushed in, but not Camilla. She stood above him, arms crossed over her paint-stained apron, her face twisted in that smug little smile I'd come to hate. Drama isn't a substitute for discipline, Leo, she said. If you can't handle the workload, maybe this place isn't for you. Then she turned to another boy, tall, fresh-faced, and clearly her new favorite, and added with a sharp smile, at least I upgraded. I stepped forward before I realized I had moved. What happened to him? Camilla shrugged. He was supposed to recarve the torso 3 times. He got sloppy. I told him to do it again. He refused, so I told him to do it 5 more times. We all have to push past comfort to find greatness. Leo tried to stand and fell again, his leg buckling under him. A staff member called for an ambulance. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I just took out my phone and hit play on a voice memo I'd saved from weeks earlier. Camilla's voice crackled through the room. I love breaking them so they know who made them. If they hate me, good. That means I'm doing it right. The room went still. The program director, a balding man in a cable-knit sweater, adjusted his glasses and said quietly, Art is a demanding process. Sometimes it requires intense mentorship. You have to understand, this is her method. I looked down at Leo, crumpled on the floor, trying not to cry in front of 20 other kids, and I realized they weren't going to stop her, not because they didn't care, but because they thought what she was doing was genius. So I walked out of the room without saying another word. I held Leo's backpack in my hands. My son was in an ambulance, and Camilla? She went back to carving, like he was just another broken block of stone she'd discarded. That night, Leo didn't say a word when I picked him up from the ER. His knuckles were raw, and he held a cold pack to his wrist, but he refused the wheelchair. Walked out on his own, jaw clenched the whole way. When we got back to our apartment, he dropped his bag by the front door and walked straight to the balcony. I heard the screen door slide open, then the heavy thump of something hitting the alley 4 floors below. I stepped out in time to see his sketchbook, thick with smudged graphite and cut-up tape tabs, bouncing off the fire escape before landing spine first in a puddle. Leo, he didn't look at me, just stared out over the city like it didn't exist. I didn't push it. I knew that look. Knew that tightness in his jaw, the way he blinked fast like he was trying to hold something dangerous behind his eyes. So I just said, dinner's in the fridge, and left him alone. The next morning, I made scrambled eggs and toast like usual, put his plate down across from mine, where it had always been. No sign of him. I knocked on his bedroom door, half expecting to find him still asleep. Empty bed. I found him in our storage space, down in the back of the building. It was sweltering already, the kind of sticky July heat that clung to your skin. The door was half open, and I heard a soft, rhythmic creaking before I stepped inside. Leo was hanging from the ceiling beam, doing slow, perfect pull-ups, shirt off, arms shaking, sweat pouring off him. I stood there for a second, stunned. We used to keep holiday boxes and broken chairs in that room. Now, it looked like a makeshift gym. A yoga mat, a 10-gallon water jug for curls, a cinder block with hand-carved grip holes. His old carving apron was balled up in the corner. Leo, I said gently, you okay? He dropped to the mat and grabbed a towel. His voice was flat, no breath behind it. I needed a space without distractions. Breakfast's upstairs, I said. I already ate. That was a lie, but I let it go. He sat cross-legged on the mat, started digging through a toolbox. Not ours. It was the custom set I'd had made for him on his 13th birthday. Soft leather wrap, each chisel engraved with his initials. Only it wasn't full anymore. Half the tools were missing. Where's your gouge set? I asked. Leo didn't look up. Gone. Gone where? Camilla gave them to Darren. Said they were being wasted on a soft-handed hobbyist. The words hit harder than I expected. I waited for him to react, to cry, to scream, to throw something. But he didn't. He rolled his shoulders once, calmly, and pulled out the remaining tools, inspecting each like a soldier laying out gear before battle. "I'm done being the weak one," he said quietly. "I'm going to change everything." His voice didn't shake. His hands didn't tremble. It scared the hell out of me. "Leo, I've got it," he said, standing. "Really, Dad? I'm good." He wasn't good. He was focused, hollowed out, like something inside him had been replaced overnight by something sharper, harder. I wanted to say it was just a phase, that he'd bounce back, but I knew that look in his eyes. He wasn't bouncing back. He was burning the bridge behind him. The first time I heard the alarm go off at 3:30 a.m., I thought it was a mistake, just Leo forgetting to turn off a reminder from the day before. But then I heard movement, water running, closet doors opening. He was awake, on purpose. By the time I got up around 6, the hallway lights were already on, and the kitchen smelled faintly of black coffee and acetone. I found him crouched at the dining table, copying anatomical drawings from an old book, bone structures, tendon studies, wrist mobility charts. His pencil moved in clean, measured lines. There was a protein shake next to him, untouched. His hair was still damp from a shower. "You've been up since when?" I asked, rubbing sleep from my eyes. He didn't look up. 3:30, same as yesterday. Why? Because hands like mine don't carve rib cages unless they earn the right. I had no idea what that meant, but the way he said it, like it was scripture. Over the next few weeks, I watched him build a new kind of routine. Mornings were anatomy drills and grayscale value studies. Afternoons were strength training, pull-ups in the alley, sledgehammer swings against an old tire, deadlifts with bags of concrete he made himself. I found a receipt for a pair of gymnastic rings he'd ordered online and attached to the doorway with makeshift brackets. Nights were usually for sculpting, never clay anymore, only stone, and then notes. Page after page. He stopped eating dinner with me. At first, it was casual, not hungry. Then it became policy. "I'm cutting anything that causes water retention. You're 16. Flawed hands create flawed art," he said, dead serious. He had stopped wearing gloves when carving, even though he used to hate how the dust dried out his knuckles. Now, his hands were cracked, sometimes bleeding, but he refused bandages, said it dulled sensation. I tried to reason with him. One night, I put his plate down anyway, roast chicken, his favorite, and green beans with lemon zest the way his mom used to make them. He didn't even look at it, just took out a Tupperware with hard-boiled eggs and dry oats. "This isn't a diet, Leo. It's punishment." He didn't blink. Good. I should have seen the next moment coming, but I didn't. At his grandmother's birthday dinner, he showed up with a shaker bottle and 6 peeled eggs in a sandwich bag. Didn't touch the paella she'd spent all day on. Didn't even say thank you. She smiled, but I saw her hands shaking when she poured the sangria. After dessert, she went to her room and didn't come back out. That night, I sat at the edge of Leo's bed and asked gently, "Do you remember the taste of her saffron?" He stared up at the ceiling. "Luxury makes you soft. Love isn't luxury." "Same thing," he said, rolling over. 2 weeks later, I came home late from work and heard him in the living room. Not music, not carving, counting, push-ups, quiet grunts, breathing clipped. I peeked around the corner. He was soaked in sweat, his arms trembling. A pile of chocolate truffle wrappers sat beside him, crumpled like guilty confessions. He was on push-up number 147 when I stepped in. "Leo, stop." I slipped, he panted. "I don't deserve." "Stop." He didn't. Not until he hit 200. Then he collapsed, curled into himself like he was ashamed of having eaten anything sweet, of being human. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag him into the kitchen and make him eat a goddamn cookie. But all I could do was sit beside him. He didn't look at me, just whispered, "Weak hands make soft stone." And right then, I knew. He wasn't trying to get better. He was trying to disappear into something harder. Something Camilla would finally consider worthy of shaping. I went looking for drawings. That's the only reason I opened the leather-bound journal on Leo's work table. I thought maybe he'd sketch something he was proud of, something I could hang on the fridge or scan into an archive. Something soft, but there were no drawings. Just pages and pages of writing. Angry, scrawled notes, most of them without punctuation, some barely legible. "You don't bleed, so it's not art." No more excuses. Weakness is a choice. Soft boys don't get carved. They get replaced. The sentences weren't dated, just stacked on top of one another, sometimes overlapping. On one page, he'd written the same phrase 17 times. "I am not a waste." But the worst was near the back. I flipped a few pages and stopped cold at the sentence scribbled across the center of the sheet like it had been dragged out of him. "Mom lied when she said I was enough. That's why she starved." My chest went tight. He never talked about her that way. Not out loud. Not even when he was little and still thought she was just sick from ballet. But I had seen that sentence forming for years in the spaces between his silences. I sat down slowly, the journal still open in my hands. The room smelled like dust and mineral oil. There were half-finished busts along the wall, too angular, too perfect. None of them looked like Leo. They all looked like people who'd never been allowed to fail. When he came home that night, he was soaked through from training in the rain, his hoodie clinging to his arms. He didn't even seem surprised to see me sitting there. "You read it," he said. Not a question. I didn't mean to. He didn't look upset, just tired. Not physically, emotionally, like he'd already moved past being mad. I nodded toward the bench. "Sit with me." He hesitated, then did. For a minute, neither of us spoke. "I didn't know you were holding all of that," I finally said. He shrugged. "You did, just not the words." I wanted to argue. I didn't. Instead, I said, "I think it's time we talk to someone. A real someone, not me." Leo's eyes flicked up, wary. "Like a therapist?" "Yes. I'm not crazy. I never said you were." He stared at the floor. "Will it make you feel better?" "No," I said. "It might help you feel something again." He didn't answer. But the next day, he came downstairs early, hair brushed, no gym bag, just a quiet nod before we got in the car. The therapist's office was warm and smelled like tea. Leo didn't say much in the first few sessions, but he kept going. Every week, the therapist told me he was showing progress. I should have been relieved, but something about it felt too quiet, like he wasn't healing, just learning how to hide the wound better. It was a ranger who called. His voice was clipped and official, like he was trying not to panic me. "We found your son near Lake Halbier. He's okay for now, but he was hypothermic. He said he was doing some kind of ritual." I dropped my coffee, didn't even notice the cup hit the tile. By the time I got to the emergency room, Leo was already being rewarmed. He was hooked up to 4 fluids, wrapped in heated blankets, his skin pale and trembling. His fingers were red to the knuckles, but he refused the warming mitts. Tried to shake them off like they were attacking him. "They'll bloat my fingers," he rasped. "I need precision. Don't ruin them." A nurse tried to reassure him. "Sweetheart, it's just saline." I said no. It wasn't anger in his voice. It was terror. Real, shaking, full body panic. When I asked the ranger what happened, he pulled me aside, looked me straight in the eye. He was waist deep in the lake, shirtless, barefoot, carving something into the ice with a wood chisel. Said it was a cleansing. Said he was testing if he deserved to make anything at all. Leo had called it a ritual. He'd told the ranger it was a tribute to Camilla. That name again, like a ghost he couldn't exorcise. In the hospital room, I sat beside him and held his hand. Even when he tried to pull away, he wouldn't stop trembling. His lips were cracked, his voice broken. "She said clarity comes in suffering," he whispered. I leaned closer. "Who did?" But I already knew. "She said the pain shapes us. That if I can't withstand it, then I'm not worth sculpting." He turned toward me, his eyes glassy, bloodshot, and too calm. "Dad." I lasted almost 2 hours. My hands didn't shake. Not once. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch something, to pull Camilla out of whatever designer studio she was hiding in and drag her into this room to see what she'd done. Instead, I stayed quiet, and I kept holding his hand. Later that night, after he finally fell into a medicated sleep, I stepped into the hallway to make a few calls. One to his therapist, one to a specialist, one to myself, just trying to breathe. When I came back into the room, she was there. Camilla, standing at the foot of his bed, wearing Leo's custom apron, the one I'd had stitched with his initials, the one she'd told him wasn't earned. She turned when she saw me and smiled softly, like this was just another opening night at a gallery. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "He just wanted so badly to be molded." I stared at her, couldn't move, couldn't think. Leo stirred, then opened his eyes. When he saw her, he started laughing, a sharp, broken laugh that came from somewhere deep in his stomach. He couldn't stop. Nurses came in. The monitor spiked. He thrashed under the blanket, still laughing, still trembling, even as the alarm started screaming. Then he stopped, completely. The room spun. I barely remember the code blue, or the rush of bodies, or the way they pushed me back. I just remember the second time his heart stopped, the way his mouth twitched, like he was still trying to finish a sentence. And then he said it, just a whisper. "Am I worthy now?" They revived him. Barely, but something in him didn't come back. And Camilla? She left before sunrise. Without a word, without the apron, just a smirk and the echo of a boy who never asked to be broken. I sat in the car outside the gallery for nearly an hour before I could make myself go in. It was Leo's memorial exhibit, Resilience in Form, hosted by the Harlow Institute in collaboration with select mentors and patrons. That's what the flyer said. It didn't mention that one of those patrons had nearly destroyed him. I finally stepped out of the car when I saw the first tour bus unload. People in dark clothes with gallery badges and latte cups filed through the glass doors, some of them already holding souvenir tote bags. It looked more like an art fair than a funeral. When I got closer, I saw her, Camilla. She was standing beneath one of Leo's final pieces, a stone torso cracked down the middle like it had been struck by lightning. His tools had carved it, but it didn't look like Leo. It looked like a scream frozen in marble. Camilla posed beside it with a practiced melancholy, tilted her head just so. A photographer snapped a picture as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and dabbed at the corner of her eye. At the reception desk, they were selling commemorative postcards, close-up shots of Leo's sculpture with quotes in cursive like, "Beauty requires sacrifice," and "Pain is the mother of precision." $25 apiece. I stared at them like they were some kind of joke. No one there knew Leo. Not really. They didn't know his dumb impressions. His love for sour candy. The way he used to tap his pencil against his leg when he was thinking. All they saw now was Camilla's version of him. Tragedy wrapped in aesthetics. A young artist gone too soon. A product of her process. I couldn't go inside. I watched from the edge of the room, just past the sculpture lighting, where the shadows reached. And when she noticed me, her whole performance changed. She made a quiet exit through the side hallway. I followed. We met near the back office, behind a divider lined with artist statements. She didn't look surprised. "Marcus," she said softly, folding her hands. "Thank you for coming. This has all been so emotional." "I want the apron," I said. She blinked. "Leo's apron. The one you wore at the hospital." "Oh," she said, placing a hand to her chest. "Of course. I'm so sorry. I didn't think." "You did think. You always think." She reached into a tote bag resting on a stool nearby and pulled it out. Folded, cleaned, like she was offering me a napkin after dinner. "I only wore it to feel close to him. He was special." "Don't," I said. "Don't say his name like you built him." Her face dropped the mask, just a little. Enough for the real voice to slip through. "He wanted to be molded," she whispered. "I just gave him shape." I stared at her for a long time. Then I took the apron and left. As I walked back to the car, I passed the gift table again. There were postcards, yes, but also candles, pamphlets, and framed prints of Leo's final sculpture, signed by Camilla in the corner. She wasn't mourning him. She was marketing him. And worst of all, people were buying. Leo's studio sat untouched for weeks after the memorial. I couldn't bring myself to go in, not because I was afraid of seeing his tools or unfinished sculptures. I was afraid I'd open a drawer and hear his voice in the back of my head, whispering about flawed hands and worthy pain. But one morning, I finally unlocked the door. The light through the slats hit everything in gold. His gloves were still on the stool. A protein bar lay unopened next to a mason jar of dull carving heads. The walls were lined with pinned-up sketches, some anatomical, some just shapes. All of them clean, controlled, almost sterile. I started organizing the space. It felt like something I could do with my hands while the rest of me stayed frozen. That's when I found the drawer. The small filing cabinet beneath his desk had always been locked. I thought it just held reference materials or old art show pamphlets. But now it clicked open with barely any resistance. Inside were lined notebooks, each labeled by date, month after month of entries, labeled in tiny block letters. I opened the one marked OCT, DEC, expecting sketches, maybe some practice grids. Instead, I found a log. October 2nd, hesitation is weakness. I see it every time you touch stone. October 5th, she moved the light, so Darren's block was clearer. Said mine was muddy. October 11th, if your father loves you as you are, he's lying to you. Every page was filled. Times, quotes, sessions, notes on other students being pitted against each other. Mentorship turned into combat. Praise one week, sabotage the next. Camilla's voice echoed in every margin, every entry, every underlined phrase. She hadn't just manipulated Leo. She had studied him, broken him in increments, built him up when she wanted him devoted, cut him down when he got too steady. There were notes on when she praised his calluses, and then later mocked the same hands for being blunt like a craftsman's. It wasn't just abuse. It was a system. I kept reading for hours, going notebook by notebook. They stretched back nearly a year. Leo had recorded it all. Every insult, every lesson, every time she told him that love was earned through suffering. The worst part? He didn't write it with anger. There weren't outbursts or pages torn in half. It was methodical, like he was trying to understand her rules so he could finally win the game. At the bottom of the last journal was a sketch, a small one, done in charcoal. It was a profile of a boy with his eyes shut, mouth clenched, shoulders tight. The caption underneath, written in small, careful handwriting, read, "I hope she keeps this one. It's the most honest sculpture I've ever made." He meant himself. That night, I scanned every page. I built a private site, password protected, no names at first, just the timeline, quotes, and sketches. I added one audio file, the voice memo I'd once played for the Harlow director, the one he'd shrugged off. I love breaking them so they know who made them. I made it the first thing visitors would hear when they opened the site. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not yet. But in that quiet room, with Leo's journals around me and his memory burning behind my ribs, I started a war. Not loud, not with fire, just with the truth. Page by page, stone by stone, she sculpted his destruction. Now, I'd sculpt the evidence. It started with an email, a simple subject line. I think Camilla did this to my son, too. I thought it was spam at first, until I saw the sender's name, Laura Edmonds. I remembered her from the Harlow orientation day 2 years back. Her son, Caleb, had been one of the scholarship boys, just like Leo. She wrote, he was hospitalized last fall, psychiatric hold. He told the doctor she made him cut off the weak parts. I didn't believe it until I saw your site. Please call me. I called. Her voice was brittle, like it hadn't been used for anything but crying in months. She said Caleb stopped drawing entirely. His sketchbooks went blank. He slept on the floor with no blanket. Said softness, dulled clarity. Sound familiar? After that came more messages. One from a dad whose son left art school altogether and joined the military, hoping boot camp would erase the softness Camilla said ruined him. Another from a student who'd studied under her years earlier and was now a social worker. He'd been watching her rise in the art world with silent dread. Then came a package. No return address. Inside was a USB stick and a note. I kept quiet too long. I can't anymore. The files were time-stamped videos and JPGs. In them, I saw her studio. Not Camilla's recent, curated one with polished marble floors, but an older space, raw and industrial. The assistant must have filmed on their phone from a corner desk. One clip showed her walking past a student's piece and muttering, "This looks like a boy who's never bled." Another showed her yanking a clay bust off a stand and smashing it against the wall while the boy flinched. She laughed, and then I saw it. A plastic box in the corner, labeled in marker. Models. Inside, broken glasses, carved wood scraps, paint-stained gloves, personal things, keepsakes from her students, trophies. I emailed the assistant. Didn't expect a reply. They wrote back 2 hours later. I always wondered if I was overreacting. Then Leo died. I'm done being quiet. That week, the site traffic tripled. I added a new section, testimonies. Anonymous at first, just the facts. But soon, people stopped hiding. They sent me permission to share names. Parents, former students, even one teacher who'd been asked to leave the program after undermining Camilla's methods. Each story was a new stone added to the structure. Not an expose, not yet, but a case, a record, a pattern. She wasn't a mentor. She was a method. She handpicked boys who were eager to prove themselves, who wore hunger on their faces. She'd call them promising, isolate them from their peers, then whittle them down, withhold praise, reward silence, celebrate pain. And when they cracked, she'd call it part of the art. Leo wasn't a tragedy to her. He was a template. By the end of the month, I had over 30 submissions. A parent called her a sculptor of suffering. Another boy, now in his 20s, wrote, "I still flinch when I touch clay." But reading what happened to Leo made me realize I wasn't crazy. She did that, and I survived her. I printed that one and pinned it to Leo's studio wall. It was the first time since his death that I let myself feel something close to hope. Camilla hadn't just broken my son. She had built an empire on their broken backs. And now, it was time to take it down, brick by brutal brick. I didn't go to the press. Not yet. First, I built a list. Names, titles, committees, foundations. I found every organization Camilla had ever received money from, every gallery she was scheduled to appear in, every academic board that had praised her unorthodox but effective methods. I found the donors who funded her grants and the professors who defended her in print. I compiled every glowing quote, every smiling photo, and then I sent them the dossier. No emotion, no speeches, just facts. Scanned images of Leo's journals, time-stamped videos from the former assistant, screenshots of her calling boys weak clay and saying, "They don't make artists, they break them." The voice memo, front and center. I love breaking them so they know who made them. That's how I opened every packet. I sent out 43 emails that night and 10 printed copies by mail. The silence that followed was brief, but heavy. It didn't last. 3 days later, the first sponsor dropped her. The email came from a university trustee. "We had no idea. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." Then another. A regional arts fellowship quietly removed her name from their alumni page. Then the magazine. Camilla had been scheduled for a full profile spread in Modern Artisan. I saw the teaser headline weeks before, "Sculpting the Soul, Inside the Mind of Camilla Jensen." Now, the issue hit shelves with a blank page where her profile should have been. Editor's note at the bottom. "We have withdrawn this feature following credible allegations of misconduct." She tried to spin it, of course. Her first public response came in the form of an open letter, posted on her website and reshared by a few still loyal fans. It read, "True art makes people uncomfortable. My methods are direct, yes, but they are also intentional. The boys who came through my studio weren't victims. They were evolving." She called it radical mentorship. She called Leo's death a tragic but misunderstood act of personal struggle. She said anyone who couldn't distinguish discipline from abuse wasn't ready for greatness. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because by then, it wasn't just me. Former students began posting their own testimonials. One young man posted a photo of his hands, scarred, rigid, and wrote, "She told me to sand the hesitation out of my skin. This was refinement." Another posted a sculpture, unfinished, cracked in half, with the caption, "This is what I became trying to meet her standards. I left the rest broken on purpose." The comments poured in, not from trolls, not from critics, from survivors. Camilla tried to sue for defamation. She tried to claim the journals were forged, that the assistant had edited the footage, that I was emotionally unstable. But truth doesn't flinch. We had the records, we had the pattern, and we had each other. By the time her next gallery dropped her, the ripple had become a wave. The Harlow Institute released a statement calling her no longer aligned with the values of the program. Her upcoming artist-in-residence post was revoked. She vanished from the schedule. The sculpture world didn't implode, but it shifted, quietly, meaningfully. The pedestal she built from other people's pain, it cracked, and this time, no one came to help her glue it back together. The apron came back in the mail, folded, pressed, wrapped in soft tissue paper, like someone had finally decided it deserved dignity. Tucked inside was a letter. The handwriting was tight and neat, careful, like someone still trying to prove they'd learned something from her, but on their own terms now. "My name is Ethan Dyer. I studied under Camilla 6 years ago. I was one of the good ones, as she used to say. I thought being tough meant staying silent. But Leo's story opened something in me. I teach now. Real teaching. No cruelty. No blood. I thought you should have this back." It never belonged to her. I held the apron for a long time, ran my hand over Leo's stitched initials. I remembered when it first arrived, how proud he looked modeling it, spinning around the living room with marble dust on his cheek and safety goggles too big for his face. He didn't wear it to look important. He wore it because it made him feel like he belonged. That weekend, I cleared out the storefront next to the florist on 9th and Hudson, an old print shop someone had abandoned 2 years earlier. I rented it for 1 month, just enough time to do something Leo never got the chance to do himself. Show the world who he was before they tried to shape him into something else. I called the exhibit form before fire. No media, no press, just a quiet invitation list. Family, students, a few parents who had reached out. I asked the other boys if they wanted to contribute. Many did, but Leo's work was the centerpiece. Not his last sculpture. Camilla's gallery already claimed that as their lone centerpiece, wrapped in tragedy and performance. No, I chose the early pieces. A clay bust of our old Labrador, a lopsided soapstone hand, a crooked torso with 2 short arms, and a face full of flaws. Flaws that made it human. I printed one of his journal lines on the wall, in large black lettering. "I just want to make something that feels like breathing." The opening night wasn't big, but it was full. And it was quiet in the best way, people walking slowly, reading the quotes beside each piece. Some took pictures. One boy cried. Midway through the evening, a young man stood by the corner wall, gripping a cup of lukewarm cider. His name was Julian, 19. He said Leo's story saved his life. "I was 2 weeks from dropping out," he said, voice shaking. "I thought the pain meant I was almost enough. But after reading what happened, I finally realized I wasn't broken. I was being broken." I didn't say much, just nodded. Later, I added a plaque beside Leo's sketch of a chisel, drawn in faint pencil on notebook paper. I mounted the apron beneath it. Below, I placed a small sign. "The Leo Rio Scholarship for Emotionally Vulnerable Boys in the Arts." Applications opened that night. I never spoke to the press, never posted the gallery online. I didn't need to. Word traveled the way grief does, quietly, sideways, through people who understood. The following spring, I took Leo's first sketchbook, the one he'd thrown off the balcony, and laid it to rest in the soil of the same lake where he nearly disappeared. I buried the apron with it, not to forget him, but to release him from the shape someone else tried to force him into. Leo wasn't meant to be carved. He was meant to create. And now, he finally will. Through every boy who steps into art with trembling hands and is told, for once, that softness is not weakness. It's where the work begins.